Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the New York State PTA Mental Health Task Force, thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to join us this evening. My name is Patricia Janko, and I'm honored to help facilitate this evening's conversation. Care for the caregiver, you matter too. Tonight is about the people who show up every day for others. Parents, grandparents, guardians, teachers, family members, caregivers in every form. Whether you care for your children, aging loved ones, or family members with unique needs, caregiving is one of the greatest acts of love, but it can also be exhausting, overwhelming, and isolated. Tonight's space is supportive, respectful, and judgment-free. There are no perfect caregivers. There's no perfect balance. There's only real life, and tonight we'll talk about it honestly. Before we begin, though, I just want to say, please know that this webinar is no substitute for professional help at any means. Our goal tonight is to open conversations, provide support, build awareness, and encourage help when needed. We are honored to be joined this evening by Patty Frazier, the president of New York State PTA, members of our Mental Health Task Force, Susan Fisher, our New York State PTA Legislative Coordinator, Lynn Petrowski, our New York State PTA Recognition Specialist, and Shauna Wald, our New York PTA Mental Health Specialist that serve on our Mental Health Task Force. Special guests this evening, we have Lissa Zukoff, sorry, I did it again, Lissa. Lissa Zukoff, the New York State PTA Special Education Specialist, and Donna Bradbury, our licensed mental health counselor. Donna is a clinician and an administrator with over 30 years of experience in government, nonprofit, and higher education settings, with a focus on children, young adults, and families. She currently serves as the director of the School of Mental Health Resource and Training Center at the Mental Health Association in New York State, better known as Mahaney's, and also maintains a private clinical practice. Throughout her career, she has led cross-system initiatives that strengthen collaboration between mental health, education, and community services. She previously served as the Associate Commissioner at the New York State Office of Mental Health, where she helped expand statewide prevention programs and advance school-based mental health supports. Thank you for being here. So Susan, do you want to put up the polls and we can get those underway? So our first poll this evening, and again, I apologize, we wanted to do this as a separate entity, but we're going to go ahead and do it all together. Our first poll question this evening: when was the first time you took time just for yourself? Today, within the last week, within the past month, more than a month ago, or I can't remember. Poll question 2 is: which feeling do you experience most often as a caregiver? Fulfilled and connected, tired but managing, frequently stressed, or emotionally drained? Our third question is: what is your biggest barrier for practicing self-care? Lack of time, feeling guilty, financial constraints, or not knowing where to start? And just be patient with me because my screen does not look like your screen. And I need to find my
Do you want me to read the next question,
Can
Patricia?
you see it? Number 4,
Yep.
please.
Yep.
Thank you, Susan.
Question number 4 says, how comfortable do you feel taking time for yourself when others rely on you? Very comfortable, somewhat guilty, very guilty. Question number 5, how often do you ask for support? Regularly, I feel comfortable reaching out to people, sometimes, then rarely, never, and only in emergencies. And what is one small commitment you can make to yourself this week? I think we can leave this poll up for a little while just as some late um, participants sign on. It'll still be active and they can do it until we want to talk about it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I want to thank all of you that have been answering the poll so far. And as Susan said, we'll keep the poll up for a little while for people coming in a little later, and then we'll go back to some of those results and we can go over them. So to help us begin this whole conversation, I would like to ask Donna a question. So Donna, can you share with us what caregiver burnout is and why caring for ourselves is so important?
Sure. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you for inviting me to be with you tonight, and welcome to everybody who's here. So, few words about caregiver burnout. First of all, uh, burnout and stress are very tightly related, and really, you can think about burnout as resulting from sort of an accumulation of stress. And it's important to think of stress existing on a continuum, right? So, like a little bit of stress in our lives, there's always a little bit of stress, right? Running in the background, and that's not necessarily harmful. In fact, sometimes it's a little bit necessary to have a little bit of stress because when the alarm clock rings in the morning and we've got to go to work or care for our children or do the things that we need to do, um, then that little bit of stress motivates us, right? And it helps us to do what we need to do to get through the day and to live our lives. But stress gets to be problematic when it's on the higher end of the spectrum and when it's long term and when it's unmitigated, meaning there's nothing. Oops, oh, there's an echo. Trisha, can you mute? There you go. Thank you. Sorry about that. Um, so when we have chronic stress, when there's no relief, when there's very little support, right? That's when things become problematic. And that is when burnout can happen. So, there's various definitions of burnout, and I was looking at some of them earlier today to prepare my remarks, but you can think of it as physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion that interferes with your ability to function, right? And this is what happens when a caregiver devotes all or much of their time and their energy to the caregiving function and none or very little to taking care of their own well-being, right? So that's when people are at risk of burnout, is when all of the energy and all of the focus is on caregiving the other. And it can result from the caregiver doing more than they're actually able to, either able to financially or physically or emotionally, right? So when you're sort of exceeding your capacity, that's when you can be particularly at risk for burnout. Burnout's very common. So in surveys, we see as much as 60% of caregivers experience symptoms of burnout. And what does burnout look like? It can look like exhaustion. It can look like withdrawal from friends or from family. It can look like a loss of interest in things that formerly were, very, interesting to you and desirable for you. It can look like feelings of hopelessness or helplessness. It can also be sort of more physical changes, like changes in sleep patterns, changes in appetite, changes in concentration. And if you're thinking about, gee, this sounds like it could also be like, it sounds like depression or anxiety. And that is true. Like some of what burnout looks like can also look like symptoms of actual disorders. Might be irritable. You might be getting sick more often because your immune system wears down when you're under tremendous stress. So that's a little bit of what it looks like and what it is. And Patricia, let me know if you want me to say more, and I can also say provide more commentary later. You're still on mute, Patricia.
Patricia, you're muted.
Thank you. This happened before. I want to thank you, Donna, so much. This brings our conversation a little bit closer to home. And let's hear from some of the people who are actually living caregiving in different ways. Caregiving can look different for every family and every person, so let's begin. Lisa, would you like to start? I'd like to start with you. Can you tell us what caregiving like for you right now?
Hi. Right now for me, caregiving is a little bit crazy. It's very cyclical. I think that it's important to note from most of us, I would assume, that not every day is different from the next day, but there are some things we need to track. And for me, as a caregiver to my children, a lot of it tends to echo the school calendar, even as they get older. So right now we're doing a lot of meetings. It's the IEP seasons, it's planning for next year, it's planning for transitions and for graduation. So I have a lot of meetings, a lot of painful conversations, a lot of happy conversations, but to prepare for those, excuse me, and I'm also getting over cold. Um, I need to go to doctor after doctor and take my child to doctor after doctor, and those appointments need to be made and to be scheduled. And there need to be prescriptions that need to go back to the school or to the summer program or whatever medications need to be made. And there's a lot of logistics, and really, it seems like it's not important, but it's incredibly important. And somebody's mental load has to carry all of that, in addition to supporting the family through the everyday. And for me, especially, there's an additional twist in that one of my children is going to be graduating this year from high school, which is exciting. It's been a bumpy road. So this is something we're excited about and looking forward to. But there are transition services now that we have to work with. We have to work with OPWDD and Access VR and different ways that he can be supported to be, college and career ready on his end, and how we can make sure that he has what he needs. And it's also a big change. Things that the school district used to provide are now no longer going to be provided. And there's, that all has to happen. And who's going to figure out how to make that happen, and who's going to support the family in making that happen, and who's going to alleviate any anxiety that people have as that happens? Well, it's going to be me. So for me right now, caregiving is a lot of busy work and a lot of supporting other people, and a lot of getting ready for the transition from the end of the school year into the summer and preparing for next year's school year. And it seems to happen all at the same time. So that's what's going on in my home.
Thank you for being so open and share that. And it sounds like you're extremely busy. Um, Susan, can you tell us what caregiving looks like for you currently?
Sure. So similar to Lissa, I have a child living at home. So he's a freshman in high school. So just the normal day-to-day caregiving, up for breakfast, out to driving him to school every day, the general mom things. I In the personal world, we have construction going on, so it's managing all of that and includes managing my fur babies and making sure they're okay and they're locked away where they need to be or at daycare and who's picking them up. It's like having a toddler again. And then, managing, people in the house who are living with mental illness. And then as a professional, I'm a social worker who works in a home for women and children experiencing homelessness. So it's also spending my days at the shelter, caregiving for the moms and the kids and making sure that their needs are met, and then coming home and cooking dinner and making sure that my family needs are met. So there's just a lot of that mental load that Lissa brought up that we all have started to talk about more about making sure that everybody's needs are met, that everybody's where they need to be, everybody's doing what they need to do, and then maybe eventually figuring out what I need to do.
Wow, between the two of you, I have to say you're keeping busy, and the fact that not only Susan are you doing the caregiving for your own home, but I'm sure that the caregiving that you have to do in your job as well can be exhausting and tedious and yet fulfilling. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate that. Because of the the way the polls went and how we don't have them up right now. I'd like to reach out to Lynn and ask her the same question, if she could share with us what it looks like for her. Lynn, what does caregiving look like in your life currently?
So currently, it is family. When I go to work, it's the young boys that I work with. Um, you take the role as the caregiver. And even though it shouldn't be that way, I can't help myself. Um, and it gives me a lot of added pressure. And it brings me back to when my mother was very sick. My mother lived in a different state. My husband was working in a different state. So it was me, my youngest child, who I had to find somebody to help me here so that she could get to school and be fed while I'm flying cross country to help my mother. Unfortunately, my father was not a lot of help. So it was me. My brothers weren't there. It was difficult. So I was just living on a plane. Um, I try to appear easygoing. I like to laugh. The truth of it is, I am such a control freak that it hurts. And I will go and go and go until I crash. So we have good days and we have bad days.
Thank you, Lynn, for being so honest. I think a lot of us feel that way as caregivers. We just go and keep going like the Energizer Bunny until the battery runs out. And that's something that we're going to talk about as well, how we can care for ourselves while we're trying to care for other people. Shauna, would you like to share what caregiving looks like in your life right now?
Or, I mean, I think in my world, caregiving is that I am the one who keeps it all together for everybody else, right? Because if I fall apart, then I can't help anybody, right? So no matter how I'm feeling, like I have to be the strong one, and realistic, right? Because we can't go back in the past for whatever's happened. I'm the one, if someone's freaking out, I have to be the level-headed one. And if I don't, I feel like everything's going to fall apart. So I take care of things because it's just easier to do it for myself, do it and not have to worry about anybody else, how they're going to take care of it. Um, so we'll see how the dynamic changes because the college kids are coming back soon. Um, but I feel I'm okay being the go-to because who else is going to do it if I don't? And I guess that's part of what we will talk about later. Uh,
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for sharing. Thank you for sharing. I know it seems to be a consensus amongst everybody is that we keep going until, no one else can do it. We're the ones that are carrying the load. And oftentimes that in itself can be stressful. And those points that Donna, made about burnout and the difference between the burnout and the stress, we really need to take heed of those. I know in my life, I've oftentimes and just recently finished being not only caregiver for someone who is very ill, but who was also in a hospice and taking care of them, transitioning them from, this life to the next. And I do exactly what, Lynn said. I go and then I crash and burn at the end. So I'll be there for everything. And then in the end, once everything is over and done with, and I've taken care of everyone else's needs and their emotions and, done all of the, the doctor things and, all of the case things that need to be handled, I'll disappear for a while. And I don't know that that's the healthiest thing to do. Donna might be able to give us some pointers on that as we get through the presentation. Donna, did you want to add anything at this time?
Well, I mean, I think, you chuckled about the disappear for a while, but I think it's important to remember that that self-care and addressing these issues has to be unique to you, right? Like it has to work for you. It has to fit in your life. It has to be doable, right? So it really does have to be very individualized.
Thank you for saying that. And I hope a lot of our attendees will take that to heart and realize that there's no guilt in taking that step back after being so present and doing so much. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Patricia, let
Um,
me know when you want me to close the poll so we can look at that.
okay. And how's that going? How are we doing with people coming in?
We seem to have nobody new coming in, so we are good
Okay,
to use it
so
whenever you want.
okay. Um, So can we go back to it once you close it, or no, we have to address it now?
We can look at the results whenever.
Okay, so let's go on to our next question for the panel, and then we'll take a look at some of those results of the poll. So let's talk honestly about the balance in life. And we were just touching on a few things about, going like, full steam ahead and then disappearing or whatever. But I want to ask, Shauna, what feels like the hardest part about balancing caregiving and your own needs?
I say that the hardest part is creating the balance that I'm putting it's a running theme, I guess tonight we put ourselves last. So I'm like everyone else is here and I'm really like the least. Um, and I think that is something that I need to learn how to do, along with probably many others, like when do how to put myself first, or who I can go to. So I find that to be the tricky part of everything and letting go.
Thank you. Lisa, um, how do you balance everything and get your own needs taken care of in that busy life that you have as well?
Well, it's certainly difficult because you know what? I don't get to leave it behind. I have three children, two of whom have significant medical and special needs, developmental needs. So there's a lot on my plate, and there's no saying, I'm going to take the night off, right? That doesn't happen. So, how do you find balance? I've made it very clear that I really don't like the trite sayings. I know that some people find great, joy and comfort in them. And that's really what I think the most important thing is. And it kind of echoes what Donna says. It's so individual. Like everybody has to find what gives them joy, what gives them pleasure, and for, what gives them a little bit of that balance. And I also have a full-time job because, we need to eat and pay the mortgage and the lights have to stay on. So all these things need to keep going. So where is that balance coming? I do find doing this work for PTA and engaging with others helps me. SEPTA has always given me a great support and great strength because I find others who are walking the same path. So when I'm not feeling so strong, I have somebody else to help lift me up, and then I can be there for them. And the reality is, there is not as much balance as I'd like there to be. So I try to take that pressure off my shoulders, where to give myself, how am I going to do this? I'm not. It's not going to happen. I'm going to fail in that, but I'm still going to try. I'm still going to take the joy where I can, if it's reading a book or going for a walk or cuddling with my cats. Like whatever little thing is going to make me happy that moment and give me a little bit of balance. But I also think the biggest pieces, and I hope everybody takes this, let others' expectations go. What others expect of you, it does not matter. You know what's working for you and what's working for your family, and that's really the most important thing.
Well, Alyssa, thanks for saying that. I think that takes a lot of pressure off people if they could actually um, take those words to heart that you just said and give away some of that guilt and that feeling that you have when and I don't know if it's so much failure, but we feel that way, right? When we don't complete things, we feel like we're a failure. But thank you for your insight. Lynn, what do you think? What feels the hardest for you for balancing caregiving and your own needs?
Wow. Um, what's hardest is asking for help because I feel like I have to do it, you know. I know it has to be done. How could anybody help me? And somebody gave me gift card, this new place that opened up that gives these awesome head massages and everything. And I was so excited. I haven't been there yet. They've asked me 3 times, have you gone? Have you gone? Sorry, I don't have a spare minute. So balance is difficult.
Thank you. That just reminded me too. My son gave me a gift certificate to the salt cave so that I could go relax, and I still haven't used it. I actually asked him if he wanted to use it again. Susan, would you like to share with us how you try to balance caregiving your own needs and caregiving of that you give to the people who are under you at your job?
It's a really good question. It's a tough question to answer. I think we've all kind of touched on it. I think time is one of the things that is the hardest to find the balance because, like Shauna says, we're prioritizing everybody else's needs first. And so by the time I get to my needs, it's late. I'm tired. I've had a whole day of helping people and taking care of my family, but I think, struggle. And I know it's going to be weird. It's not asking for help in the same way, but like trying to explain or communicate what your needs are in order for you to feel balanced, right? So I cannot go to bed if there are dishes in the sink or something like that. So like I have to have that happen for me to feel centered and be okay. I'm like, all right, the house is set for tomorrow. Like I think of it as like being kind to like the morning Susan, like evening Susan being kind to morning Susan, right? By doing the dishes, setting the dishwasher to run, having like whatever food I'm going to defrost out and, defrosting overnight or whatever it is. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's something that somebody else in my house needs. So having that like letting go of the expectations that they have to have the same thing and they should be doing the same thing versus me doing the same thing. And also that letting go of those expectations of like, and I used to work at the resource center where Donna works, and we do a lot of conversations about self-care, but letting go of like the meditative, the outdoors, the expectations, like what everyone thinks you're gonna say that you should do as self-care. And like really Friday afternoon when I get home, once I hit the couch, like I'm done. I'm not getting up for dinner. I'm not letting the dogs out. Like that is it. Like Friday night, my family knows like once I sit on the couch, like I can cook dinner if I come in and I'm just going, going, going. But once I'm done and I stop, like I'm done. It took a while for me to be okay. Like, okay, I can watch 7 hours of TV on Friday night because that's what I need to decompress from the week and be done. And it's okay that I'm not going to exercise. And it's okay that I didn't, go read a book and I didn't go do art or do meditation. I can just sit there and watch TV.
Thank you. I have to tell you, I think many caregivers share the same and similar feelings. It's even, taking a bubble bath if that's what you want to do, and that's your time. My self-care is making sure I drink enough water every day, and I have little timers to remind me or whatever else. But I think we all feel there's not enough hours in the day, and by the time I do have a moment to myself, I'm exhausted. So when people ask like self-care or how are you balancing things, we are often too exhausted to do that. But you're taking the time out and you're, decompressing and watching your movies. And I know Lissa, you have your little things that you'll do for yourself, just like you said. And thank you. I appreciate that and being so honest with us about this. So do we want to go ahead and show some of the results of our poll at this time? So on our first question, um, Oh, that's good though. Some of you have taken the time to actually just for yourself, which is a great step, but that doesn't mean that, anyone else's answers are wrong. Um, and it's a great reflection. Um, Others shared it's been much too long, or they can't remember. And again, there's no judgment in that. Caregivers often become so focused on everyone else's own needs that we moved to the bottom of the list. And I think a lot of you had said that tonight when you were talking about caregiving, that we often put our needs under everybody else's. So for our reflection poll number 2, which feeling do you experience more often as a caregiver? Fulfilled and connected, tired but managing. And that's interesting that nobody answered that at all. I'm glad to hear that. Frequently stressed, yes, and emotionally drained. So I guess those two would take up the place where tired by managing would come in. And again, thank you for your honesty. These responses show how caregiving can bring multiple emotions at once: fulfillment, fatigue, stress, and exhaustion. And whatever one you have selected, it's valid. And caregiving is deeply meaningful, but also emotional draining. I know at times it's very difficult. Um, so our next question was, what is your biggest barrier for practicing self-care? Lack of time, feeling of guilt, financial constraints, and not knowing where to start. That lack of time and not knowing where to start seems to be a big one for everyone. These barriers are very real, and for many caregivers, they overlap. Time, guilt, finances, and uncertainty often all show up together in one lump sum. And this helps us understand why self-care can feel so out of reach. Um, so our next one is, how comfortable do you feel taking time for yourself when others rely on you? Um, and again, I think, let's see if I can get this to move up. So we have very comfortable, somewhat guilty, or very guilty. So again, thank you for sharing. Many caregivers struggle with this balance, often feeling some level of guilt when, we step away. Wherever you are, your feelings again are valid, and taking time for yourself supports it doesn't replace your caregiving. It's just a way to support yourself in the whole big scheme of taking care of the rest of the family. Um, let's see, our last reflections poll number 5. How often do you ask for support? This is a very important thing that we're going to delve in a little bit with Donna. So it was either regularly, sometimes rarely, never, or only in emergencies. And I see that a lot of people answered rarely, and you usually manage things on your own. It's quite common for caregivers to support others more easily than it is to ask for support ourselves. Reaching out often happens only when things feel urgent, right? But support is the most helpful when it happens earlier. And asking for support is not a sign of weakness. It's healthy and an important form. Donna, do you want to take some time out and talk about some of these points that were brought out on this survey? I think this is a great time for you to interject and let people
Yeah.
know that some of these responses might be normal.
Yeah. 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 Thank you, Patricia. Absolutely. That's exactly what I was thinking. Like, just first of all, let's just validate each other, right? These are all normal feelings that we're experiencing in this caregiver role. And Surveys and research really back this up that like particularly let's talk about guilt a little bit because guilt particularly is a very, very common experience for caregivers. It's particularly common in women, but also women tend to be the caregivers more often than men. And that's, we could talk all day, right, about like sort of societal expectations and gender roles and all that sort of thing. But the reality
Most
is,
definitely, yeah.
right? The reality is, I think there's probably all or mostly women on this call, and there's a good reason for that. Also, people who have been in the role of caregiver for a long time tend to have more feelings of guilt, and caregivers who are caring for someone with particularly high needs. Um, often tend to feel that guilt a little bit more deeply than others. And you heard earlier when the women were talking about their experiences, you heard the word expectations a lot. And I want to talk about that because a lot of feelings of guilt emanate from expectations. And some of you mentioned, the expectations that others have of you. And I think it might have been Lissa said, like let go of other people's expectations. You don't need to abide by those. And that's very good advice. And I would also ask you to examine your own expectations of yourself, right? Because these sort of emanate from like kind of deeply held internal beliefs that we have about ourselves, right? And and we often don't like really consciously think about those beliefs, but they really drive a lot of our thoughts and our feelings and our actions. And so if you have, for example, like deeply held beliefs about like that you're not worthy of, you know, um, relief or care yourself, and that your role is really to take care of others, if that's like a really deeply held belief, that's going to drive a lot of these sort of feelings of guilt if you then try to heed people's advice, which is, oh, you should be taking care of yourself, right? You should be taking breaks. You should be, building in time for yourself. That's going to be particularly difficult for you if deep down inside you believe you should not do that for whatever reason. There's also some interesting thoughts out there about different kinds of guilt. And so as I go through these, like think about what might resonate with you. So there's something that we might refer to as self-care guilt, which is just pretty straightforward. Like you feel guilty for taking time out for yourself, for that self-care that we've been sort of referencing. But there's also something called limitation guilt, which is this feeling of somehow, even though you're doing all this caretaking, you're not doing enough, right? Like, so you feel guilty because like you're busy all the time doing the caretaking, but you still feel guilty because you feel like it's not enough. And then there's emotional guilt, which is very interesting, because, it's not at all unusual for caretakers to harbor resentment, anger, frustration, and some of that might be directed toward the person whom they're caring for. And then you realize that, you become conscious of those feelings, and then you feel guilty for having those feelings, right? So that's what emotional guilt looks like. And then there's decision guilt too, where you might be sort of second guessing yourself and say, well, if I had only, kept my mother home instead of sending her to the nursing home, or if I'd only done this for my child, then they would, be better off or whatever, right? Like we can be our own worst critic, right? And so this decision guilt of, I wish I had decided something differently in the past may haunt you and, really, just cause you to feel really badly about yourself. Um, there's some signs that you might be really suffering from guilt is these feelings of ambivalence, the anger, the resentment toward loved ones or other family members, feeling as if the whole caregiver burden is on you. If you feel that way, if you feel like really you're the sole person here that's doing the caretaking, you really ought to be, very careful about, how that might be manifesting for you. If you feel unappreciated, especially by the person who you're caretaking, that is kind of a recipe for, bad feelings. And then feeling as if the caretaking has taken over your whole life. Um, these are just some things to watch for, and to pay attention to. And to, some of these are, like I've alluded to, can be very sort of deep-seated things that, are kind of embedded in your thought patterns. And so if any of this resonates with you, I would really, suggest that you think about if, finding somebody to talk to. There's lots of good professionals out there. Or it doesn't have to be a mental health professional. Maybe it's a clergy member. Maybe it's, just a really trusted friend, somebody that you look up to, somebody who you feel is wise and helpful. Um, but there's also professional help there. And I realize that, that's an investment of time. It's an investment of money potentially. That's very important to acknowledge, right? Because some of you mentioned also the lack of time. I think on the survey, the lack of time was one of the top reasons why people don't, perform self-care. And, uh, you know, I would encourage you, later on, I'm going to put in the chat, I would encourage you to think creatively about things that you can build in to your normal routine that you don't need to set aside special time for. And, it seems, maybe it might sound overly simple, but there's real evidence behind this, that if you spend a few moments breathing deeply, that does tremendous wonders for regulating the nervous system and alleviating stress and kind of dissipating that stress response in the body, which is really important. And it really doesn't take much time. And I will give you a link to free online live sessions where people teach you something called coherent breathing, which is a very specific way of breathing that is shown scientifically to alleviate stress. So there's different ways of thinking. We sometimes our head just goes to, well, self-care means this, or okay, I have to talk to a therapist. But there's lots of options that you can build in to your day that maybe doesn't cost anything at all, and maybe only will take a few minutes. There's other things too, like just doing some yoga stretches for a few moments or something like that, right? Or walking, like just walking your tension out. Drinking. Somebody mentioned drinking water. It might have been Patricia. Drinking plenty of water. Like there's just very, very simple, doable things that will help with your overall wellness. It's not going to solve all your problems, but it will alleviate some of that stress response so that you have a little bit more energy and a little bit more well-being so that you can then take further action to take care of yourself.
Thank you, Donna. You touched on so many different aspects of caregiving that some of us may not have thought about, but the minute you mention them, they just hit so close to home. That emotional piece alone and the decisions. As a caregiver for, dying and death, that's one of the biggest things. I signed a DNR. If I didn't do that and I went ahead with this procedure, would things have, gone a different way? Or even with my children with their, special needs. If I had reacted this way and took them to this specialist instead of that specialist, would things have worked? So you had given us some tips. I just want to get a little bit deeper with you. How do we change this whole mindset that we have about not seeking, mental health expertise and things in our lives that we can reach out and get this help if we need it?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I love that word mindset because we all subscribe to a certain mindset, and that really dictates our behavior. But, the first step is really just sort of examining that, right? Like asking yourself the question, like, why is it that I haven't reached out for help? What is it that I really believe about, I don't know, like seeking mental health care? Like what are my feelings about that? So just kind of questioning, your own, like maybe previous assumptions or based on your past experience or based on, like your family's attitudes or your cultural attitudes toward help seeking. That's what really drives a lot of our behavior is just kind of the way we were raised and, these, just sort of assumptions that we make. And so if you just call those into question and just ask yourself, why is it that I'm not taking better care of myself? Like, really, what is that about? And what is it that I really believe, about my role in this family or about my role as a caretaker, right? So just sort of questioning yourself. Like chances are, if you're watching this webinar and you're in a caregiver role and you probably have a level of motivation to sort of examine like what's going on with my life. Is it meeting my needs? Am I functioning the way I want to function? Like, am I happy? Like we don't expect everybody, it's impossible to be happy all the time, but am I content with my life overall? What's the meaning? What's the meaning of my life? What is the meaning that I attribute to this caretaking role that I have? Does it define who I am, or is it just something that I do? So these are just what I guess my advice then is just to ask yourself, right? Like just sort of examine these things. And then, find somebody to talk to about it. Like bouncing ideas off of people is the best way to just sort of, process what's going on in your own life. Um, and I do want to mention, I put two things in the chat. So one is the Be Well website, which is the New York State Office of Mental Health wellness site. And I encourage everybody to check it out. It's really well put together. There's a lot about stress relief there. So check it out. There's tons to explore there, lots of materials, and share it with others. And the other one is Breath, Body, Mind, which is the coherent breathing that I mentioned a minute ago. And I can't say enough good things about it. It's really valuable information and for free, you can register. It's a lot. They're live Zoom sessions. You'll see if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, there's lots of time slots to choose from. And you learn these techniques that then you can do on your own. And it really makes you feel better.
Thank you, Donna. I know that many of our panel of the women on the panel tonight had mentioned about this whole guilt thing and feeling guilty that you can't, do something or fulfill the needs in the caregiver role. And that's a big thing to ask us as well, ourselves as well. Caring for ourselves is not taking away from others. It strengthens yourself so that you can keep showing up with the energy, patience, and presence that you deserve to have in order to help them. And I'm going to ask Lissa, Susan, or Lynn or Sonia, Shona, if you had anything you wanted to add, or maybe you can discuss what some of the signs are that you see of being overwhelmed and how you cope with that.
Well, for me, actually, I completely shut down. I completely stop. I dissociate. I've realized this is probably my love of the opossum videos that I have started sending my friends. They freeze and they look so cute. And then you're like, that's pretty much what I do. Right. Susan's nodding because I send them to her. But the truth of the matter is, it becomes so overwhelming, you don't even know what to do. And you just freeze. And for me, the key is I have pen and paper everywhere. I am love stationery. I spend probably more money than I should on pretty notebooks and pens, but it is a lifesaver for me because when I start to feel that overwhelmed, like I don't know what to do or where to turn, I start making lists of what has to happen. And then at least I feel like I'm doing something. I'm getting a handle on it. I know what needs to get done. I'm getting it out of my head and on paper. And then I could check it off, which is one of my favorite things to do, is to check things off. And then I start realizing what I am doing. So when it feels like you're doing nothing, we're doing so much more in the littlest ways that we don't even give ourselves credit for. We and when you write it all down, you all of a sudden realize how much is getting done, and also what you need to do. So you're less stressed about what you're not doing, because you can at least get a handle on it, and you could see, you could prioritize, and you can schedule and decide, what needs to wait and what can get done. So for me, like, I don't sleep well on a good day, so I can't judge lack of sleep as a way of, when I'm losing it. For me, it's when I start to just completely shut down. And then I know that, like, I don't know where to go. And since I'm usually very action oriented, and very much type A, like I'm sure all of us are, if I'm hitting the point where, like, I'm just frozen, then I think of I'll be the opossum, with who knows how to write. And at least when I come out of it, like, I have something that I can do to take action in that way. I don't know if that would work for anyone else, but
Thank you for that perspective, though.
Crossing off a list, Lissa, is the most sad. I will write every solitary thing down, if even if I just did it and it wasn't on my list, then I love crossing it out. That it's a good feeling, right?
Well, especially when you have that type A personality and you need to, crossing off the list could be very fulfilling when you start seeing things come off your list. Susan, I want to turn to you next. What signs do you notice about yourself and feeling overwhelmed, other than Friday nights coming home and watching those 7 shows? Um,
Um,
what are your
yeah,
signals and signs?
I mean, I have to agree with Lissa. It's definitely that feeling of overwhelm and frozen and not really knowing what to do. And just, you look around and there's always something that has to be done. I also find I get short tempered. Like, I have less patience for everyone around me if I'm starting to feel burnt out and stressed. And I, like Lissa, love a list and love crossing things off and making myself, and like, maybe if I look organized, I'll be organized. And, I will write things down just to try cross them out, just like Shauna like said, like, oh, did the dishes. Well, then let me put do dishes on there and cross it off at the same time, because that's going to make me feel like I did something. I also have been working to reframe the things that I value and the things that I value for my time. And I think that in this stage of life, when I have one child that's out of the house and one child that's in high school and rapidly growing up, I'm starting to realize the passage of time. And so it's actually something I can credit my husband with, like telling me, like, you need to have good times with them. Like, you need to go spend time with them. You need to go do the fun thing. Like, you're the caretaker, you're there every day, you did all the homework, you did all the tests, you make sure they study, you get them to extra help. He's like, but you have to have the fun things too. So I try to reframe, like, if I'm feeling overwhelmed and I'm don't want to do anything and I'm on that couch, but like, hey Nathan, let's go watch a show together, then I feel like at least I'm also connecting with him, and I'm not. And as a caretaker, I love it. I love spending time with my family. That is one of the things that refills me and re-energizes me, but in a way that I feel like it's okay for me to, watch TV, and then I can feel like, okay, so it wasn't just me being alone on the couch by myself. I spent time with my family. So it changes the value in what I've also been doing, because now it's a memory. We have shows that we watch together. We have these experiences. We watch Instagram reels together, so I try to make it as something that I value as a person, which is time with my family, but is also something that I need at the same time, if that makes sense.
No, thank you for that perspective. I mean, that you brought out something that nobody has said all day, and Donna like touched on it a little bit when she was talking about things, the irritability, and the resentment. And we reached that point and we're running on empty. But I like that specific things. I know I shared with you this weekend about how I've been telling my kids I'm not in any pictures. So anything that we do, any fun thing I'm doing with the kids, whether it's sitting in the hot tub with my son or, making bread with my daughter, I'm like, take a picture because we're here, we're in the moment. Because all those years of making sure everybody else had their kids' pictures at school or, things that were going on, I was never in them because I was making sure everybody else had what they needed. Dottie, you touched on it a little bit, and I'm going to ask you again if you can tell us why noticing these signs of being overwhelmed and stressed early are just so important to our health and our self-care.
Yeah, for sure. The earlier the better, right? Because we're creatures of habit, and so if we fall into a rut and develop, habits that are then harder to break the longer they're around, right? So the earlier you can catch this stuff, the more likely it is that you can change in a positive way and feel better. It's really just as simple as that. I put some more ideas in the chat, things like just having compassion for yourself. So treat yourself as well as you're treating others, right? Just accept yourself for your whole self, including your imperfections, because we're all human. Maybe find a support group if possible. Also, another idea too is to look for training opportunities, like even just like a webinar like this, but like, if there's a specific, I don't know, you're caretaking for somebody with Alzheimer's, right? There might be an organization, a health plan, or a network of providers that hosts a training, right? That makes your job as caretaker just a little bit easier because you walk away with some tips, right? And just have an opportunity to talk with other people who are doing that same type of caretaking. So look for training opportunities or, ways to just expand your knowledge, or maybe a book to read, or a program to watch. Or even like a social media account to follow. Like there might be, right, like good role models that are, just giving. I follow plenty of people that have lots of tips for self-care, lots of tips for self-compassion. There's books like Brene Brown is a good source of information. She has a book called The Gifts of Imperfection. I think every woman should read it. I think everybody should read it, but particularly women. Um, so yeah, just some other thoughts. And if you do seek professional help, a professional can help you. Look, we are in a life situation that we can't necessarily change, right? Like we can't necessarily just jump out of our lives and create something new, but a professional can help you to manage your stress, can help you to give you techniques to manage your feelings and how you perceive the situation, right? That's one thing that we always have control over is how do we perceive the cards that we've drawn that we've been dealt, right? How do we deal with that? So, and a professional can help you deal with those feelings of guilt if you're experiencing that, and just to create a plan. A lot of us women, we're in these roles because we're good planners and we can get things done. And so if you apply those skills to yourself, and maybe with a little help with a facilitator or with a therapist, you can create a plan, for yourself, for your own well-being.
Thank you, Donnie. You know yourself, though, as a caregiver, we're always great with plans for other people, but not so much for ourselves.
That's
And I
right.
know, Lisa, you had touched on this before about reaching out and talking to people. Oftentimes, just having a friend that you can, bounce things off of. I know, as far as caregiving for, sick and ill people, there are groups that you could reach out to. The doula service and hospice care and things like that. Even for our children, there's different things. I know that when, my son in school and we, had dyslexia issues and everything else, and we had a group that we reached out to, and it helped his self-esteem to look at that list of all the individuals who were so well accomplished in life that actually had that different ability as well. So that often helps. And it also allows us to respond with care instead of waiting until we're just completely depleted and have nowhere to go. So Shauna, I'm going to ask you, what makes it so difficult for us as caregivers to ask for support or help? What do you find is hard for you to do that? How?
Um, I think it's really just um, one, giving up the control, right? That you need to rely on others, and it's really hard to do that. And also believing that um, I can do it best, right? I can do it better. It's easier if I do it myself. And I just, and it really is just easier and quicker if I do things myself. And you know, I guess
Thank
really
you.
that's really it. The control and the ease for myself. I wish but I've been taking notes and taking all the tips from everybody here. They're amazing
That's
ideas.
great.
Donna.
Thank you.
Can I
And
do a
Lynn,
little, sorry,
go ahead,
Patricia, but
Susan,
with
go right
what
ahead.
Donna was saying and everyone saying and what Shauna just said made me think, I also am going to do a little plug for the PTA because I will be honest, like when we're talking about groups and talking about people, meeting people, being in the PTA and joining the PTA has linked me up with other people who are like me, who have done this before. Or when I was struggling with, my son, when he was having special needs issues, I had already met Lissa. And so she was able to give me some advice on how to advocate. And, it always makes me think of that West Wing clip where Leo McGarry's talking to Josh Lyman, and he talks about like a guy falls down the hole, and a priest sends down a prayer, and a doctor sends down a prescription, and a friend jumps down, and he's like, but now we're both down here, and he's like, yeah, but I know the way out. A lot of us are here and together, and we know the way out, and we have, and being surrounded by people who you can are in it, are like-minded and are parents and are in the same stages of life that we are, I think is invaluable. So I had to do a little plug for the PTA on this.
No, that's great. I mean, Lissa alluded to having, friends or a group to talk to, and you just still elaborated on it, and that's wonderful. And
I
again,
can I just add one thing? I'm so
go
sorry because
right
I
ahead.
think I just want to clarify because I do agree having friends and groups to talk to, but I also want to say do not be afraid to set boundaries. Too many people will read on the internet. There's great fix for whatever, my child's a type 1 diabetic. I can't tell you how many people send me links to things that are going to cure him. No, his pancreas doesn't work. That's not helpful to me. That's actually hurtful to me. It's hurtful to him, and it's not being supportive. And I know that your heart might be in the right place, but it's not. I have been very clear to people where my boundaries are, and I'm not afraid to reiterate them. And I think we need to do that for all things. It's like, we have a newborn and someone comes over. If their idea of helping is sitting on a couch while we wait and serve them, that's not helping. So I
Absolutely,
think
absolutely.
we just need to not be afraid to advocate for ourselves as well. Sorry.
No, thank you, Lissa. That's wonderful. That's great. So that's some of the realistic examples of support that we can ask our friends and groups, somebody to run errands, maybe somebody to do the meals or order meals instead of, having to put that pressure on ourselves. With we have school age kids or even our adults with if we're caring for adults with Alzheimer's or other needs or whatever else, there's adult care, there's child care issues, or appointments, trying to schedule them where, you're doing more than one appointment at the same time, or someone could appointment share with you. Um, sharing the responsibilities at home. Susan, I know your kids are starting to get a little older, and maybe they see mom likes to have the sink emptied after dinner or whatever else. Maybe they're starting to pitch in and help, which would be a great thing at this time.
I think you
Um,
give him way more credit than he deserves for that. You've met him. You give him more credit than he gets for that.
maybe it's something we wish for. I don't
Are you
know.
sure?
But even the whole thing about accepting help when it's offered, that's one of our biggest thing as caregivers. People turn around and ask us, what can I help you with? Um, Sometimes being more specific on what you can help with is better because most cases we'll all turn around and go, oh, nothing, I've got it all. But Lissa pointed out people coming over to visit a mom who's tired and exhausted because we all know what it's like to have a newborn and get on that schedule and everything. And people come to visit and they just want to hold the baby or they want you to serve them dinner. No, they should be bringing you dinner or doing your laundry or letting you have a nap while, the baby needs to be, cared for. Those are ways that people can help us and reach out. So I know we're getting close to our time, and I want to get ask Donna a couple of more questions here before we go. Um, so one of the things that I know Alyssa had mentioned, and Susan, you had mentioned it, is setting boundaries. How can we set boundaries without feeling guilty about it?
Yeah, well, I that's a very good question. And it ties into like all those feelings of guilt that we were talking about earlier, like, and asking yourself, why do I feel guilty about this? Just taking time for myself or asking for help. It's really something that you yourself need to understand, right? And and experiment with, right? Like just experiment with it. Like what would happen if you did, right? If you did actually set a limit and say, no, I'm not going to take on that extra responsibility, or I'm not going to volunteer for that project, or I'm not going to do this thing, right? Like there's the line and I'm not going to go over it. Experiment with it. What does that feel like for you? Experiment with asking somebody to, do you just rattled off a great list, Patricia, like, can you pick up food for me? Can you do the grocery shopping for me? Just try it, right? Because I've said it before, we're creatures of habit and we get very uncomfortable when we sort of stray off of those habits. But like really amazing things can shift if you do something a little bit out of the ordinary. So I just encourage you to experiment. Like just treat it like a scientific experiment. Like what would happen if I asked my mother-in-law to pick up dinner? I don't know, whatever it is. Just an experiment. That might not be a good idea for everybody. I don't know, but
I
but
have
you
to
know what
tell
I
you, I
mean.
did try it at one time in my home, and the first thing they had to say is, "Oh my God, what's wrong with her? There's something wrong with her." And then I turned around and go, "No, it's just I'm tired and I need help, and I'm finally asking for it." And you're all sitting here going, "Oh, she's cranky or whatever."
Yeah.
No, I need help. Um, and I'm sure some of you, Susan, Lissa, Lynn, Shauna, you've had the same things in your lives where you've tried and all of a sudden there's something wrong with you because you're asking for things. Um, so
Right. And to be overly worried about what other people think of you, right? Like
I love that.
it's
That statement, it resonates the
right.
whole night, right?
Absolutely. And, when it comes down to it, like whose life are you living? Are you living your life or are you living their life? Like, just really, life is short. And if you find yourself making decisions based on what other people are going to think of you, then you're living their life or you're living their expectations of your life. And you'll come to a point where you regret that, right? So it's just a different perspective.
And sometimes it's not even what they think, it's what we think they think of
That's
us.
right.
And,
That's right.
we put that on ourselves. So you did touch briefly and you shared with us, when should somebody consider professional support?
Mhm.
Um, so what are some of the warning signs again that you can
Sure.
just go over again for us?
Sure. I think if you're really having trouble functioning, right? If you're having trouble, um, you know, um, getting through the day, if you're very preoccupied with really negative thoughts that are getting in your way, if you're, not able to perform whatever is expected, right? Like if you have a job outside of the home, if you, the actual taking responsibilities that you have, if somehow you're not able to sort of meet those basics, if you notice a dramatic change, in your, mood, right? If you uh, are having any thoughts whatsoever of harming yourself, of harming somebody else, those are really big warning signs, right? That again are experiences that many people have, but it's really incumbent upon you then to, call somebody and get some help. You can call your physician, your primary care physician. You can start there. Um, you can call your insurance company and get a list of providers to call. You can do you can call 988. If anybody if yourself or anybody in your life is really in crisis, call 988 and you will get somebody on the line who can direct you to local services that as needed. So, and it may not be, hopefully it's not that severe, right? But if you're having any trouble functioning and you're not, you can say to yourself, this is not how I want to be, right? This is not how I want my days to be, then it's time to talk to somebody.
Thank you. And that 988, I could tell people, it's a fantastic tool to use. There's no judgment, and they're there and they will guide you in the right direction of what you need and where you could go for that help. So thank you for that.
Sure.
So before last reflection poll for the night, and it was just a question. You could put your answers in the chat. You don't have to share them if you don't want to, but this is one final reflection, and we want, what is one small act of self-care that feels realistic now? Something you could do for you now. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be yours. Something simple, something doable, like Donna said. Not perfect, just possible. Donna alluded to this before. Small steps create meaningful change. Caregiving is one of the most powerful acts of love that you could do for your family, your friends, yourself. But you must love yourself. You need to include yourself in that. So with that, we're going to leave you with 6 realistic tools that you could use. Lynn, do you want to go ahead? The first set of tools are going to be micro self-care.
This is probably my favorite because I need to turn my brain off. So I will sit and watch reality TV. Um, the other thing is to say, hey, you know what? It's okay. Let's get pizza tonight. And ironically, my husband came in because he just got home from work. And I says, just give me like 15 minutes. He goes, no. He goes, I'm going to go get pizza. Do you want something? So that was really nice. Um, Taking a walk. Over the weekend, my husband says, last weekend actually, he says, come with me. You never come with me when I go for a walk. And I thought it was just going to be up the block. We went about 3 miles. And I have to say, it was nice.
Because you were enjoying it. So your short walk turned into a longer walk. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
That's wonderful. So small moments of care can make a significant difference. Look at what that walk did. Lissa, you want to use boundary language for us?
Well, I'm sorry, what do you want me to do? Cover the
Give us
boundary
some
language?
tips on boundary language. I can't commit right
Oh,
now. Things
tips
like
on
that.
boundary language. Well,
Yes.
I'm going to be rated PG here. I'm not typically rated PG in my personal life. So, but I will tell you, I immediately, when somebody sends me a link to some herb that's going to fix everything, or whatever magic
Okay.
pill somebody is selling, I email them and I say, do you think I don't want the best for my child? Because obviously, if there was something that would help him, I would have heard of it. Their doctor would have heard of it. And for me, my father is a pediatrician. I guarantee you he would have heard of it. So I'm very clear on everyone that I do not need any medical advice. I do, as Susan said, interact with my own tribe. It's SEPTA and PTA, and that's different. That's because we're all sharing guidance that we asked for. I do live that same boundary in my life is I don't offer advice unless I'm asked because people don't want to hear what they don't want to hear. We don't know what other people's boundaries are. So if someone doesn't ask, don't offer it. But I also am not afraid to say I'm not comfortable discussing it right now. That's not something that we're looking into. And then sometimes I'll just say thank you, but no. And no is really, it's a sentence. It's a sentence all by itself. So like, don't be afraid to do that. Just to say no and then walk away. You can leave. I saw that Susan put no FOMO in the chat. That was actually my New Year's resolution a couple of years ago. I don't do New Year's resolutions, but my vow for New Year was to give up FOMO, to not do anything that for the reason of FOMO, to be afraid of missing out, to only do what I want to do genuinely for myself, or obviously we have to do things for our family, but not because I feel that I have to, which is, relieved it. But I think, boundary language is hard, but it also involves surrounding yourself with people that you trust, and getting rid of the dead weight. And that I think that we've all been there. I think if we're caregivers, we've learned to prioritize what was important and what is important and being able to say, sorry, but no. And that is the biggest lesson I've learned is to only surround myself with people who uplift me and who I can uplift and who respect me enough to listen when I tell them no.
That's wonderful. So basically, you're telling everybody either let me get back to you later, or I need to prioritize my family now, which are great things. Healthy boundaries protect our time and our energy. And I'm glad to see that. And you know what? You don't have to be PG with us when you're around us. We appreciate it every step of the way, Alyssa. Thank you. Susan, can you give us some tips on delegating what you can?
Sure. So I think delegating is hard for all of us type A moms carrying the mental load, but delegating doesn't mean telling other people what to do or how to do it or, giving up your chores. I, as a mom, am the sole provider of all the food. I am the only one who can find the ketchup in the refrigerator or anything like that. But I will tell you, COVID changed my life and I don't go to the grocery store anymore. When I started Instacart and having my groceries delivered, and then after COVID, I started working, and then I went to grad school, and then I started working out of the house. I get my groceries delivered. I place the grocery order, and my kid puts it away when he comes home, and it might not be in the right place, but we have food in the house, right? If I want to, there's specific grocery stores I can go to, but it's no longer a burden. It's 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I can place my order. I can get what I need done. I am a I was raised by very strict parents, so my bed has to be made in the morning. And my husband is not the same way. So we have an agreement. He has to make the bed in some way. I will go fix it if I have time, but I cannot leave. But for me and my anxiety and my sense of calm, I can't leave the house if the bed's unmade. But he is not going to make it the way that I want it with the blanket nicely and the pillows on the right and fluffed and the extra pillows. But if it's made and I need to leave the house early and then I know my bed is made and that is our agreement. I won't give him a hard time about it as long as he makes the bed in some form when when he gets out of bed. And if I don't have time and I want to, I will fix it to my standards. And that's my personal hiccup. It's just allowing for them to do things. I cook, they clean up after dinner, so that I can sit down for a few minutes after I've cooked dinner. And maybe that sometimes means rewashing a pan or, later at night when I'm doing my night Susan being nice to morning Susan has to reload the dishwasher because they don't understand how to load the dishwasher. But for those few minutes, somebody else is doing something. And, it's kind of it's understanding like my love language is service to others and taking care of others. And so having someone do something for me or at least trying to, even if it's not the way I want it done, it helps.
Thank you. I know I learned many, many years ago when it came to all the chores and everything else and working two jobs and trying to take care of the kids that if my husband didn't pick up everything off of a shelf and to dust under, and he just dusted around, I was going to accept it anyway and just sort of ignore it because you know what? Later on, if I have the time, I'll go back and dust it, but I needed to just move on with other things. So delegating is not really a sign of weakness. It's a healthy way to preserve your energy for what matters most. And Susan, you brought that out. Lisa, you've mentioned it. Shauna and Lynn, being with our families and doing those kind of tasks and being present with them. Lisa, again, I'm going to jump on you for support inventory. Um, what can we do to help our support team and build things up so we find ourselves with the support that we need to get through life?
Well, I think I'm going to reiterate what we've said here, which is join organizations. Like I joined CHAD, which is for ADD, and that they meet locally and they bring in speakers, and it's how I met some other people and got some useful information. We're all going to reiterate PTA, finding those friends you trust, even going into Facebook groups. Facebook can be a dumpster fire, but if you're mindful of the private groups for a specific area, you can find, some really good, solid advice and some solid places to go to find, what works for you. I think that's just the trick, is to keep it small, to really you're going to meet people through people, and that's how you're going to know who's going to support you. But also lean on your own crew, your children, your husband, your parents, your siblings, the people who are, also supporting you. Sometimes we don't realize that they are, because they're not doing it the way we like to do it, right? They're not puffing our pillows the way we want them puffed. And my husband says it all the time. I micromanage him. I'm not going to do it right. So why would he bother? And he's not necessarily wrong. And so I think that we need to also, and I'm guilty of it as well, take a little better inventory of the support and the help in our own backyard. And don't be afraid to get mental health support, to reach out to your doctors, to get therapy, to do what you need to do for yourself. Thanks to COVID, there is so much available online now, that because for us, childcare may be an issue, right? You can't get out, but you can get it from home. So that is my advice. And then, just look at the faces here. We're all here and connected because we reached out for help and somebody reached a hand back down to us, and we'll do it for somebody else.
Thank you, Lisa. We don't have to carry everything alone. Asking for help is a strength. It's not a failure, right? Thank you so much for that. Lynn, you want to give some redefining enough for us?
Sure. So it's really important to say, instead of saying I should do more, say I'm doing my best. And it doesn't make you a failure by saying that. Um, Focus on connection over perfection. And just realize that some days surviving is succeeding.
Very nice. Perfection's not required for love, is it? And doing with love and doing it out of love is enough, isn't it?
And saying to your kids, hey, it's okay if you use the washing machine, even though in my head I'm like, oh my God, it's gonna break, it's gonna break.
Pink clothes.
But I've been letting go and letting them do that.
Very good. And Shauna, last but not least, I'm going to ask our mental health specialist to model wellness for our children. Could you give us some tips on that, please?
Sure. So, keep in mind that they're always listening, they're always watching, even if they pretend they're not, right? And I like to tell them it's okay to not be okay today, because tomorrow could be better, right? And it's okay to do nothing, right? Because when they're always on their screens and they see this, that, and I'm home, that's okay, because I try and tell them everybody puts up their best self and you don't see their days. Same with adults. It's all the same. So ask me for help, or let them know you're a good listener, and really do be a good listener, right? Don't, I may have 1,000 things I want to say, but sometimes I realize that they just need me to hear them out. They don't want me to, they may not want the advice yet. So you have to just let them talk sometimes, if they and be happy if they talk to you, right? Because that I think that's a sign of a good relationship. And to make sure, just to have them check in is it's a win on its own, I think.
Thank you. So children learn by watching us. We all know that. And when they see us taking care of ourselves, they learn to care for themselves. And it's not such a bad thing, is it? Um, so one of the things that we want to ask you all while you walk away from this webinar tonight is, what is the one small commitment that you can make for yourself today or this week? It doesn't have to be big again, or it just has to be for you. Something simple and doable. Like, I will take a 5 minute walk before starting my day. Just sit down and just take 5 minutes of quiet. I'll go for a short walk twice a week. I'll ask for help with one task. Ask my kids to empty the dishwasher without breaking anything or whatever else. And I'll give myself permission to rest without guilt. Those are some of the things that you might think of or consider for your self care for this week. So Donna, before we close, I welcome you to share any closing remarks you'd like to make with us.
Yeah, I think it's been a great conversation. And I think, one word that kept popping into my mind was intentional. Be intentional about your actions, what you say and what you do, and even what you think. If we st be intentional about it, um, there's something I think sort of magical that happens. Like, even Susan, when you were talking about the Friday evening being on the couch, I love that because you're intentional about it. You're not doing that and then feeling guilty, like, oh, I should be doing something else. You're very deliberate and intentional about it. And I think that's true of so many things in our lives. So I think, if nothing else, if you just remember to, like, just be intentional about what you're doing, saying, and thinking, um, you can bring just more awareness, right, to the choices that you're making, and potentially get a lot more enjoyment and satisfaction out of your life.
Donna, I want to thank you so much for being here with us this evening and for sharing your thoughts and expertise with us. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to collaborating and meeting with you again in the future. A lot of our panelists have said tonight about the things that they do intentionally. And I think that's great that we're starting to look for it. And I hope that we've been able to spark something in our attendees and our viewers that they can start doing intentionally for themselves, and try to get rid of some of that grief and guilt that they feel from, not the perfection. Because again, life isn't about perfection. And even tonight with the little mishaps we've had with the, tech, be PTA flexible, we always say. And in my life, I'm always telling my kids, be a willow and bend. And sometimes we forget to do that as caregivers. I know that Patty is still with us, and I'm going to ask the president of PTA if she'd like to say any closing remarks before we close out this evening.
Thank you for the opportunity. What a informative and wonderful evening. So much to take in. Our mental health task force has been really one of the highlights of the work that the PTA has been doing the last several years. And I know that most of you are inaugural members of the Mental Health Task Force, and I just really want to thank you for your contributions, for what you're willing to share, and for helping those who have joined us tonight to see a better day tomorrow.
Thank you, Patty, for that. So for our closing remarks, I just want to remind you all that caregiving is one of the most powerful acts of love that you can do. But in order for that love to go forward, you must include yourself. So on behalf of the New York State Mental Health PTA Mental Health Task Force, say that again 10 times fast. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, not just for your families, but for yourselves, because you do matter. And when caregivers are supported, families thrive. And we encourage you to stay connected, explore New York State PTA's upcoming programs and events, and continue this conversation in your own homes and communities. I want to thank our guests this evening. I'm going to thank Donna again for being here and giving us her expertise. And thank you all who attended, and good night.